Guest video: Michelangelo. Our next video is from Rick Steves and is about the influence the Medicis had in Florence. Search for Florence, Italy, Medici sites, Rick Steves Europe Travel Guide, Travel Bite. But the question we now ask is, did the emotional and creative feminine Michelangelo gain from the patronage of the masculine Medicis? And is this what union actually means? The answer is no. The union is intended to be a partnership forged under the auspices of divine love, and the person who fulfilled this role was a poetess called Vittoria Colonna. Michelangelo. Michelangelo was born on the 6th of March, 1475. Shortly after his birth, the family moved to Florence, where he was raised. His mother died in 1481, when he was 6 years old, after a prolonged illness, and Michelangelo was sent to live with a nanny and her husband, a stonecutter, from whom he learnt his skills with marble. From 1490 to 1492, Michelangelo attended the Platonic Academy founded by the Medici. Sculptures. His works in marble include Bacchus, a work commissioned by Cardinal Riario, which the cardinal then rejected, whereupon the statue entered the collection of the banker Jacopo Golli for his garden. The Pietà, carved when he was 24. Giorgio Vasari said of it, "It is certainly a miracle that a formless block of stone could ever have been reduced to a perfection that nature is scarcely able to create in the flesh." David. Michelangelo was asked by the consuls of the Guild of Wool, Art del Lana, to complete a statue in Carrara marble portraying David as a symbol of Florentine freedom. The guilds of Florence were secular corporations that controlled the arts and trades in Florence from the 12th into the 16th century. Michelangelo responded by completing his most famous work, the statue of David, in 1504. Moses, a sculpture housed in the church of San Pietro in Vincoli in Rome. Commissioned in 1505 by Pope Julius II for his tomb, it depicts the biblical figure Moses with horns on his head. Paintings. His paintings include Doni Tondo. Michelangelo was commissioned by Angelo Doni to paint a Holy Families as a present for his wife, Maddalena Strozzi. It is known as the Doni Tondo, and hangs in the Uffizi Gallery in its original magnificent frame. Frescoes. His frescoes include the Sistine Chapel, took approximately 4 years to complete, 1508 to 1512. Michelangelo was originally commissioned to paint the 12 Apostles but persuaded Pope Julius II to give him a free hand, and proposed a different and more complex scheme. His final fresco includes the creation, the fall of man, the promise of salvation through the prophets, and the genealogy of Christ. Buildings, as the architect include St. Peter's Basilica, Rome. In 1546, Michelangelo was appointed architect of St. Peter's Basilica, Rome. The dome, not completed until after his death, has been called by Bannister Fletcher the greatest creation of the Renaissance. New Sacristy Medici in Florence, 1534, showing Lorenzo de' Medici as a Roman soldier and the statues Dawn and Dusk. The Laurentian Library, Biblioteca Medicia Lorenziana or BML, in Florence, Italy, and contains more than 11,000 manuscripts and 4,500 early printed books. It was built in a cloister of the Medician Basilica di San Lorenzo di Firenze, under the patronage of the Medici Pope Clement VII. But the final stages of the spiritual path require there to be union between the masculine and the feminine, before there is any more progress. Indeed, Michelangelo was awash with spiritual input, as we can see, fulfilling his role as the divine feminine, but he had not made contact with any masculine. Indeed, he seemed repelled by the Medicis and their duplicity. and the way that masculine entered his life came via his poetry and a lady called Vittoria Colonna, and Michelangelo through her discovered platonic or divine love. Vittoria Colonna, April 1492, the 25th of February, 1547, was an Italian noblewoman and poet. She was engaged in 1495 at the age of 3 years old to Ferrante, Fernando Francesco di Avalos, and married di Avalos on the island of Ischia on the 27th of December, 1509. Colonna and di Avalos seldom saw each other during their marriage, since he was one of the most active and brilliant captains of Emperor Charles V. But on the 3rd of December, 1525, Fernando died in Milan from the wounds that he had sustained at the Battle of Pavia. Meanwhile, Vittoria ultimately became one of the most popular poets of 16th century Italy. Upon the early death of her husband, she took refuge at a convent in Rome. She remained a laywoman, but experienced a strong spiritual renewal and remained devoutly religious for the rest of her life. And then, at the age of 46, in 1536, she met 61-year-old Michelangelo, and a bond of friendship developed based on their mutual love of poetry. Michelangelo addressed some of his finest sonnets to her, made drawings for her, and spent long hours in her company. She created a gift manuscript of spiritual poetry for him. Michelangelo's biographer John Addington Symonds described the influence Colonna had on the painter's life. She changed his attitude to religion, she patronized his work and served as one of the closest proxies. Ascanio Condivi said, "The love that he had for the Marquise di Pescara was especially great. He still keeps many of her letters, filled with the purest, sweetest feeling. He wrote many sonnets for her, talented and full of sweet longing." But Vittoria was acting the masculine role to Michelangelo's feminine. Vittoria called him the unique maestro and my most unusual friend. She also traveled many times from Viterbo to Rome in order to visit him. Colonna Vittoria had 103 sonnets in parchment tied together, which she sent from Viterbo, Michelangelo said on the 7th of March, 1551. These were poetic messages dedicated to him. And Vittoria and Michelangelo met every day, read together, dedicated sonnets to each other, and had endless conversations about religion, poetry, and art. And thus we see that union did indeed take place. The masculine Vittoria achieved union under the auspices of divine love with the feminine Michelangelo and their creation of a son. Their poetry. The spirit is devoid of flesh, and friendship has no sex, Michelangelo said, calling the Colonna un uomo in una donna, a man in a woman. However, he devoted a lot of love sonnets to her, including the following. Seeking at least to be not all unfit, for thy sublime and boundless courtesy, my lowly thoughts at first were fain to try what they could yield for grace so infinite. But now I know my unassisted wit is all too weak to make me soar so high. For pardon, lady, for this fault I cry, and wiser still I grow remembering it. Yeah, well I see what folly it were to think that largesse dropped from thee like dews from heaven, could e'er be paid by work so frail as mine. To nothingness my art and talent sink. He fails who from his mortal stores hath given 1,000-fold to match one gift divine. Their love friendship lasted for a decade until the death of Vittoria in February 1547. She did not even live to be 60. For his part, he loved her as he spoke, and only one thing saddened him, when he came to look at her no longer alive. He kissed only her hand, and not her forehead or face. Because of her death he remained distracted and distraught for a long time. Ascanio Condivi wrote about Michelangelo, who survived Colonna by 17 years. "Death took my great friend from me," he said.